now got, I don't know. I like the 3 bars, which people call the hamburger menu. And then they were doing like 3 dots vertically or 3 dots horizontally. And now this one is 3 dots horizontally and 3 dots, vertically. 9 dots total. Like the 9 dot menu. Oh, that's how you know. Freaking keypad of stuff here. See, on our list, we had startup-y stuff, trying to stay focused, annoying UI crap, audience, Innate, IFT, and Zapier. And I think there's another one whose name I can't remember right now for like automating things. Another one that's on there is a toolkit called rsync, rclone, and syncthing. Then just riffing on mechanisms for prototyping stuff. Blasting through different desktop containers. Hey, how many different browsers do you use?
Right now, just 2. I mean,
just 2.
3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's not entirely true, but
well, I mean, Firefox and some variant of Chrome.
Right. I mostly use variants of Chrome. I do use Firefox in some places.
Do you have Edge?
No.
I don't think I don't know if Edge runs on Linux.
I don't think it runs on Mac either. So
to blather about browsers, because there's also like Icebox, LibreWolf, etc., etc. Ages ago, there was this very promising thing called Servo, which is just an engine. Anyway, then I was going to have another topic was Linux server, syslog and logging and structured logging. And then I had 2 little projects to blather about, IVU and Revis, although isValidUser is like mostly dead. This is maybe stupid. I don't know if you have one of those things to talk about, prototyping. Which one of those feels like cooler? Audience, automation, rclone, backup stuff in general. What do you do for backing up in 2025?
Right. I use bits of rsync, arc, and backblaze.
What's arc? All right, let's do this one, man. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about backing up and keeping track of like my whole digital life, your whole digital life. What are you using?
Should we reset the recording and start it back over, or should we just start it as it is?
We'll just go from here, and I'll cut it back to a couple minutes ago, and we'll publish that, and it'll just be like, what is wrong with these guys? It feels like we're starting in the middle of the conversation, because you are. So, yeah, like, I don't know, talking about backup stuff. I've got home stuff I want to back up, but I've got corp stuff I've got to back up, right? So there's me as the human, and there's me as the business. And then you just mentioned you use various combinations of rsync, arc,
yep,
which is new in my brain, and then you said Backblaze. Now I know Backblaze because of their hard drive reports. They're always talking about hard drive reports. Here's what you should buy. Something. So, which one is Arc?
ARQ. It's
okay.
Sure. It's basically a generic backup tool. I think they eventually introduced their own cloud storage service too. But so it backs up to S3, backs up to B2, wherever. Backs up to your local disk, backs up to a NAS. It's got lots of support for storage backends, and its architecture is interesting because it basically takes all of your content and stuffs it in a Git repo. I mean, it's not a Git repo, but if you look at the actual implementation, it is basically they're doing commits against a repo, which means sometimes it has some of the scaling issues.
Like large binary files that change frequently.
But it because it's not actually Git, it's their own variation. It works. It does work. It works pretty well. Backblaze and Arc both have, because I mean I back up, I don't know, about 70 terabytes of storage.
70, okay.
And I back up more of it with Backblaze than I do with Arc, and then I step down to Time Machine for quick access local stuff. And then all of my all of the Linux and FreeBSD stuff that's around here are synced back to one of the big Macs, and then get backed up with just like files off into Arc and Backblaze. And the couple of remote machines that I operate also back up here the same way. And I've been doing that for a long time.
Do your remote machines back up by pushing stuff to your here, or does your here machine access the remote machines and pull stuff?
They're a pull. I run the crons on the Macs here and do a pull.
Pull from various parts across the internet.
Yep.
So like I do something similar.
Mind you, these are like low frequency change machines. They don't have, it's not like I'm backing up live databases that I care about. Any databases that I used to back up, or SQL that has a change in it every couple of months.
Right. So I guess I'll riff on. How do you back up your phone?
Right. So with
how do you back up your phone? How do you back up your stuff in Google? Right. One of the things I guess that I would put on, hey, my list of stuff I need it to do is I need it to be able to back up Google, and I guess I want to say I want to back up other external services like GitHub and GitLab.
Sure.
And I've got public and private repos on there. So I'd like to make those things get included into my local backup or into my backup somewhere. And I've got loads of stuff in Google Drive for 2 corporate entities. I'd like to get that backed up, right? What if I lose my access to Google? Amazon Photos was a thing that existed for a while, and then they disappeared. So it was like, oh, well, there's another random service that you should probably be getting backups from, because eventually they're going to take the service offline.
I
don't know how I would like back up. Go ahead.
I sync photos into Google Photos, but it is a backup, but it's a lossy backup because they compress them and stuff like that. It's not something I would want to recover from, but I use it actually as a photo search tool.
No, I thought that was the setting you got to do on your Google Photos. Like, do you want to use conservative or something? I don't remember what I selected.
It wasn't originally, so I was always using it before that was an option, and then later they started when they got rid of the unlimited storage and you had to bring your own storage, then they made that an option. But since
where would you even
75% of what I already had backed up had already been recompressed, I never bothered to change that.
I don't know. I'm on my Android and I go into photo settings, and on backing up, it just says your backups are safe and secure. So I have it set to backup quality, original quality, parentheses, no change to quality.
Yeah, I think they did that when they started to let phones do it directly. That photo service existed before Android Photos, the Google Photos on the phones, and that integration.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Google account profile that I've had for ages, so that it is set to some old way. Although it's very likely I would have set it to original, on purpose. But now I have, my photos are on this device. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. My photos are in the cloud too, because I think it grabs most of the stuff from here. But what happens if I get kicked out of my Google account, right? I've got a Google Drive with a bunch of stuff in it, but I've also got Google Photos with a bunch of stuff in it. So I think now I've moved the needle on what needs to get recorded, what needs to get backed up, right? I've got server A, server B, probably a database, and then I just added in these external services. And now I've also got, I want my Google Photos and my Google Drive, and I want those from multiple things. So, and I want them all to be indexed so I know where to find shit, because the stuff is scattered all over.
Right.
I looked at this. I looked at some internet about ARQ, and there's an ARC cloud storage. That's cool. This guy rotates out 4 TB SSDs.
Yeah. So you can use ARC to back up basically any arbitrary path.
But then on these backup drives, this is my local one, and on my local one I use ZFS. If I can get stuff onto here, I'm very happy with what ZFS does for me, and it automatically gives you a bunch of like archival like features, ZFS snapshotting, and things like this. So but that's if I can get the stuff onto this disk, and to get it onto this disk, I have to go into my home lab, / basement, and then plug this. Well, do some ceremony on the server down there. Its name is Carbon. So just so we know this. So I go to Carbon and I do some work on its terminal. Well, I SSH in, and then I do something so that I can unplug the existing 4 TB drive that's in there, made by vendor A. Samsung is probably who it is. And then I plug in this one, which is made by Western Dig, plug this one in, and then I do the little ceremony to get it mounted up, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm ready to run the scripts that Carbon knows how to do. Carbon knows how to pull stuff off of my other servers to it, right? Carbon is probably my most trusted box. You can't get to that box from the internet. There's a bunch of ceremony to get to it from my local network, but break into my house and get into my basement is, also, I don't have any super secret stuff, right? My threat model isn't corporate espionage or something. And that thing's got loads of storage. It's got loads of temp storage to pull stuff in and do something and then move it into these kinds of things. Like that's what definitely has to happen when I'm pulling in, like I pull down a Git repo and I have it basically active on Carbon because I do work on Carbon. So why not just keep Carbon in sync with all of those things? So there's cron jobs. There's a shed load of cron jobs on that thing that are just pull. Like just run it once an hour to pull something down. If there's nothing to do, it's done in a second, maybe less. It takes longer to look up the DNS and make the SSH connection than it does to discover that there's no changes, right?
Yep.
And I pull all that stuff down, and then that's where I'm using an rsync, because I rsync from this active happy location on Carbon into archive this thing when it's mounted up to Carbon. And I hope for the best, but Carbon doesn't get my Google Drive from one or more things, and it doesn't get my photos.
Is that just because you haven't mounted it up there?
Well, how am I going to, what's the way that I should do
I don't know on Linux. On the Mac, it just shows up in volumes. So like Dropbox shows up as a folder, Google Drive shows up as a folder. So if you're running their client, it shows up as a folder. So I can just rsync off of that, or I can point ARC at it and have it copy it off or whatever.
Okay, but for Google Drive, what file format does it get?
It's just, it just looks like a drive.
I know that, but when you go to Google Drive, and I'm having a spreadsheet in Google Drive, from the UI, I can download this thing as Excel or Open Document or as a PDF or TSV or CSV or HTML for whatever reason. So how do you, what happens if you what happens if you just use a regular file system tool and copy that shit out of there? And I guess how would you get the shit back in there? So I'll share my screen and talk about another tool I know how to use that maybe is working in the right answer.
Oh, yeah, I don't have everything sunk to this one.
Sunk? It's sunk, not synced?
It's not synced. That's got my pictures folder from at some point. Yeah, I think I've got it. Because I'm only using the Google Drive connection on that machine for the photo sync.
Okay.
So everything that I'm seeing there.
Everything is what, a JPEG or something?
I mean, there's TIFFs. There's that. Well, it depends on what it uploaded. It only changes some files. But but it's basically everything that's in that pictures folder is sunk there, and that's so it's not actually sunk taking up space. It's a shell of that, like Dropbox does, right? So it does its own live temp file system. So if I load something, it takes a little while it downloads it, a big file or whatever.
Okay, I get you.
But I had all the other things on, but I turned it off, so I don't remember what it looks like. But I think it just looked like files. I mean, like, you're going to get an XLS or an open. I forget exactly which one they're doing. Maybe it's OD whatever.
ODS is the open one. I guess that was all my sort of concerned about, was like, well, what do I get if I just remote mount the thing to get there? Are you familiar with rClone? This is
I have seen it.
Yeah, so I'm working on getting this dialed in. But rClone is great. You just mount stuff with it.
Right.
And if you look at its supported providers, there's like 100 and some damn providers, including your local file system. And rClone does some fancy stuff. Like, I can copy new or change stuff from location A to location B. I can do a sync. I can do a bi-directional sync, which is a thing that scares me.
For backup, yes. There are use cases.
Yeah, it can do a move and do some. And here's the fun part: is you mount your cloud storage as a network kind of disk. And so in my universe, the way I'm looking to get this to go is there are people I hang out with that use Box and Dropbox, and I'd like to be able to remote mount those. I can't remote mount those the way it works right now. Other people own those folders, and at least in the case of Box, it's a publicly accessible folder. And to like authenticate rClone, you have to go through some OAuth thing, which means I need an OAuth client. Well, I don't have an OAuth client.
Right.
rClone knows how to talk to the API, but I have to have a client ID that I hand to rClone, that then it helps me construct a little redirect, and I get the thing, and I click the button, and I get the page, and I blah, blah, blah. So I can't do that unless I have my own Box account and then make my own OAuth client for Box and press a button and blah, 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 which is the same problem I had. We'll talk about it when I get there. Dropbox is very, very similar to something like that. But Google Cloud Storage is their S3 competitor. And I have mounted this one with rClone before, but only in the scenario where I have, you can use a Google Cloud client for these kinds of things, but you can also use rClone for these kinds of things. So I have my web server, my app server or something running, and it needs to talk to my Google Cloud storage. And I guess I could API this, and this, but I've got some low budget shell scripts that I want to run against it. So I use rClone and mount Google Cloud Storage onto, that server. Google Drive and Google Photos are the ones that get mounted in to my home machine. But I have another problem in that I've got my stuff in Drive and my stuff in Photos that I want archived. My wife's got her stuff in Drive and Photos. We're not sharing the same account, right? So now I have to have my rClone connected to my Drive and her Drive, my photo and her photo. She doesn't do Google Cloud Storage because, she's not writing web services. She does have some of those Mac services, so she might still have an iCloud drive. I don't know. I use Linode, but I don't have anything in there. Object storage, rClone would connect if I ever did. Folks I know are in Microsoft's universe for Azure and OneDrive. I don't use rclone for it, but they've told me they do, and I believe them. And then who else is down here? Oh, the last one that I use a lot of. Where is it? Samba, if you're talking to a Windows box. And then SFTP is what I'm usually using to get stuff from somewhere else. It's SSHFS basically, but it's like SFTP. You can also see they've got a note here. They do stuff with rsync.net, which I interact with, and I love those guys. But rsync.net, I think you just use rsync to talk to rsync.net, you know, like, oh, it's in the name, right? So I don't know, and maybe you use web. And so when you mount stuff with, I don't use rclone's invocation. Like, maybe this is part of my problem. I'm using rclone, all of those endpoints. You can say rclone mount. And then you start using regular tools like rsync, CP, whatever. Maybe that's the stupid way for me to do it, and I should be using rclone with one of its sub commands like copy in or sync in or something, and have it, you know, do the smart thing where it's going to get my files in the right file format, and then I'm not worried about that kind of stuff. That might be my next experiment to try, is stop using mount and rsync, because, you know, rclone, I just used the part of the tool that I knew how to work, right? And like, I don't know how to use rsync, so let me just remote mount something and rsync it. Unless it's SSH, then I'm just running rsync from the remote into here. But if rclone has a sync, that's what I should be doing, is just saying sync source destination. It's got a dry run. It's got a progress flag. Diff missing, match something, some logging tools, some various options. Flags for anything which can copy a file. Well, that's pretty like a lot. And then you just don't use delete at all. And some of these look like the same options that I'm familiar with out of rsync anyway.
I mean, I think it basically started life as rsync at one point.
But then I got to go to get this. So to get this silly thing to go, I had to go into, you know, my Google Cloud storage. I'm trying to figure out how I can get this stuff visible without you know, embarrassing myself here. So stand by. Yeah, okay, so I have this other project I've been working on. So I had to go into my Google Cloud, right? And I had to set up a project. And then I think I have to go into like my APIs and services. And I don't want to show anybody that stuff. But somewhere you got to go in there and say credentials. Oh, yes, I have a credential. And I can't remember if I set it myself up as like, well, let's try to figure it out right now with Google Drive. That's Google Drive's homepage. And here's how to configure the thing. rclone config. I'm having difficulty getting onto that machine these days. What's the dilly, yo?
The day something breaks is the day you need to use it in public.
Yeah, I think that machine has having a problem, or my Wi-Fi is having a problem. So you got to go in here to go to Google Drive, something, Google application, leave blank. Wonder why you get to do that. Oh, service account credentials only if you want to use a service account instead of an interactive login. So maybe that's how I would do it, but I don't remember how to do that. How to set up on a remote machine with no internet browser available. Note that if Arclone runs a web server on your local token, it only runs from the moment till you get back and may require you to unblock it. Something firewall. Okay, set some somethings. Have to set a folder ID. You can set up this in an unattended mode, not tied to a specific account. Synchronize files onto machines that don't have signed in users. Build machines. Service account file. So somehow I'd have to figure that out. And then here you can look at this. You could even use it for a bunch of different stuff. IAM service accounts. Create a service account and then do the stuff. That is pretty neat. Team drive, shared drive. Oh yeah, I wonder if this is going to pull in everything from my shared drive too. That would be like really cool. I guess I can't set this up for whatever reason. That'll be like the bits that I guess I can come back and report on next week, is get that. Have you ever okay. So do you, when you go offsite, your offsite is Backblaze?
Backblaze and B2, yeah. So Arc goes to B2. I mean, so it's all Backblaze, yes.
B2 is the Backblaze.
That's their S3.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's their S3, right? Because everybody says, oh, S3. It's all S3 these days.
And I
had API thing.
But yeah, you know.
And I think this thing connects to, well, Cloudflare's got one that's called R2.
Yep.
Backblaze B2, excuse me, and Amazon S3. So you could stuff it on any of those.
Yep.
And Akamai Net Storage, which is going to probably get rolled into Linode Object Storage now that Akamai has purchased Linode. So you do those and then that one. And so for some of your remote stuff, remote servers you have, do they go directly into S3
or they just go straight to a drive on my machine here, and then
everything is like pulled into the home lab or your central orchestrator or something. And do you do full systems, or are you doing just
depends
configs and stuff that you like?
It depends. Most of the stuff that's offsite, well, because some of those things have finally been retired, they're not being backed up anymore, but those were full systems. I don't have much. Most of the things that I'm doing are in-house, and I'm doing full systems on those too. So it's a hacky variation depending on how old the machine is and how much work it took over the years to be able to back it up, because it used to be a lot more expensive to rsync / than it might be today. And so, the scripts got developed that would pull things that were frequently changed that I cared more about, and then do a full backup incrementally. So I would do a weekly / and then do, pieces of my home directory or a mailing list tree or whatever on a daily or an hourly basis. So those tools are still sitting there running, doing the work, even though the need may not be the same as it used to be. But yeah, mostly I'd end up doing the full machine on those, just because knowing what to capture after you've needed a backup is too late.
Yeah, right. Has that ever happened before?
Absolutely. Because Arc and Time Machine and Backblaze, sorry, not Arc. Arc says, whatever you told me, I'm going to try to back it up.
Okay.
Dumb or otherwise. Backblaze and Time Machine both have their own internal exclusions, some of which are manageable, some of them are not. So like you mentioned backing up an iPhone, well, you asked about a phone. So for me, that's iPhone, right? So iTunes and now Finder backs those up when I plug it in and tell it to back it up, or I plug it in and have the automatic backup happen when I plug it in. But
you're plugging your phone into you're plugging your Apple phone into your Apple computer, and in the Apple ecosystem, you've checked a box somewhere that says archive my phone device when I plug it into this desktop device.
So make a backup and sync it.
Machine ecosystem.
Right. And so now it sits on my drive. It does not go to Time Machine.
It sits on your local machine's disk somewhere.
Correct. But Time Machine has exclusions that exclude that mobile storage location in the library from being backed up in Time Machine.
And you can't override that one?
I don't remember. And Backblaze also excludes that storage location.
Well, there's that, like, remember there was what was the directory, .ds_store directory?
Yeah, the DS store, yeah.
You would definitely want to exclude that because it was always just like noise in there.
Right, exactly. It's completely about desktop state. Right.
I had this old script I wrote. I wonder if I can even find it on the internet anymore.
And like Backblaze won't let you back up applications, your /applications folder. So anything that you've installed is not backed up. I mean, like, and lots of parts of the library are excluded. And their excuse is, of course, well, if you installed it, you can download it again. Well, that's entirely not true, motherfuckers. Especially if you had an old version, right? So figuring out the exclusions and Backblaze has built-ins that are manageable around things like VMDKs, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And ISOs and DMGs but maybe you want to back those up because I don't know the 30-40 hours that went into building that custom VM dedicated to this one piece of software.
Oh, yeah, snapshot the whole thing. But like if VMs are involved and you need archival, right? I think that's where you just use whatever snapshot tool is available from your.
But you still need to put it somewhere, right? Have it.
Oh, that's correct. I mean, that's correct. Snapshot my thing and then move my image over somewhere else.
It's still my data, right? So, but those you can at least remove the exclusion for.
Right.
But yeah, the tools do come with their own limits, and you have to figure out how to work around that. So some of it, I will like have a cron that will just rsync the stuff back into my kind of archive storage location. So that way it will still get backed up because it's no longer in the excluded paths.
I get you.
Or and then other things, I will build my own sets of exclusions. I was just patching one just now because there are things that will break ARC. It will still back things up, but it will fail. It will throw an error. And so like its automated disk storage cleanup won't happen because of the error, because things like where Apple syncs its iCloud storage to on disk is inside the scope of what it's trying to back up, but it will make things disappear, but not delete. I don't know how to explain or to describe it other than that it says, failed to get contents of directory, cloud file contents not present on disk. So, and I think I will have all of those things solved, and then another one will pop up, and there's another thing that Apple has introduced to the weird file system overlays.
This is one of the things that frustrates me in the Apple ecosystem, in the Apple universe, is lots of stuff happens, and where's the damn logs? And where's the spot to go in there and like adjust this thing or do this thing or do this thing, And I mean, I'm not overly a type A personality, but I get, it's very frustrating, and it seems like it always takes like an inordinate amount of time to learn some very, arcane, poorly documented something or other.
They used to be really well documented, and if you were kind of well tied into the FreeBSD world, they sort of made sense. Over time, they've shifted, changed, evolved. The last 5 years or so, the whole logging ecosystem's been undergoing a shift. But you can't say it's any different than Linux going to systemd and systemd taking over everything, because Mac has basically gone the same route, where there's now a journaling logging system that you turn on when you want to look at the logs, and it starts logging. And so it's not that dissimilar.
Well, except
if you're not involved, if you're not working with it daily, you just don't see it.
Sure, except that in the Linux universe, I don't have to use systemd.
Well, in the Gentoo universe, you don't have to.
Yeah, that's right. OpenRC for the win, baby. This is I'm looking at this old script I had, and its copyright date ends in 2011. So that's how old this thing is. But this is like the basis of what I use today. I probably actually still, am using that, but I don't have access to the box where I run this stuff. But this thing was really just designed. There used to be this tool called rdiff. I don't know if you were ever familiar with rdiff, but it was another like archive solution. It's not actively maintained anymore. And then this basically just used pgdump, slapcat. It says it uses svn hot backup for subversion. So that's like really dating how long ago this thing was active. And it says get ? Because I guess in 2011,
are we going to be using this forever? Because who knows?
Who knows? This get. Is this thing going to stick around? Probably not. It looks like shit. Yeah, rdiff backup was a good one. And so it would just like backup tools and then wrap a bunch of stuff. And I had some little helper tools on there. Like when you made the incantation, it would, I'm trying to see if I can't find it really easy. Oh yeah, like it would know if it needs to run as sudo. So you'd have to start it as root, and then it could change itself to somebody else. Or you start it as your exclusive backup user who has ability to sudo to other users, perhaps with specific commands being run. So it basically would just do that, and I would have a cron file somewhere that was just like 9 or 10 invocations of just saying setup, blah, 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 blah. To pull all of the stuff in, and that would pull everything into like my local archive directory, like the real-time backup. I guess backup is different than archive, right? So I pull everything from the internet into the backup folder, which is just a direct copy of the most recent shit that I've pulled in, and then my backup folder gets rsynced, or in the olden days, rdiff backup over to the archive folder, because like the archive folder is where you're going to have it like date aware and some other stuff like this. Nowadays, my backup routine is that I have like / opt. I put everything under the opt directory because like FHS told me I was supposed to do that one time, and like I'm good at following instructions. That's objectively false. And then from that thing, I went to, sorry, I'm trying to find this other piece of documentation that I care about. Yeah, here we go. That's what I wanted. I don't know if you've ever used this play canvas thing, but I love it, and I can never remember the URL. Get started. I don't want to sign in. Usually it doesn't need to. Only local drawings are available. That's cool. So I use a pencil mode, right? So I've got backup number 1. Machine number 1, machine number 2, machine number 3, M. And those are all the remote machines, somewhere. And then I have like the nice big server in the home basement. And it's pulling stuff in. It goes out and then pulls stuff. It connects over to this machine. And this is all like on a VPN, and stuff like this. Now, these machines, I need to back up different stuff, right? Because on this one, I've got file system crap I need to back up that's owned by user A and user B. And then I've got my database backup I want to run, which is dumping out of Postgres. And to get the full access to that one, I need to connect to that. I need to connect to this machine as the PostgreSQL user, and then make a connection to the database that's through the local Unix socket, so it can use ident to know that I'm actually the PG user that's connecting, and now I'll have full access to every database. Then I execute PG dump, but the output of PG dump is piped back through this SSH connection. It's SSH and in a VPN onto this server to receive it. And this machine, the green box, that's like everything is in opt backup. That's trying to be /B, but I'm terrible at drawing with my mouse. So after this guy syncs everything into /B or /opt/backup, for all of these things, and I guess the next thing I've got to connect, right? Here's what we're going to do next. I'm going to connect my Google Drive, and I'm going to connect my Google Photo. And what am I going to use? I'm going to use rclone. I'll draw some lines there. Well, rclone's going to mount and pull, I guess. So I should draw the arrow on this side to indicate pulling rather than whatever. So then that goes into /B. And then what do I do from /B is I move it into archive /archive. And that archive is now used to be its own directory, or used to be a mechanism where I would do an rdiff copy or rdiff backup from /backup into /archive. And everything that was new, it would put a new one. And everything that wasn't new, right, we would get these like time diffed backup snapshots. I don't even know if I have a directory that still uses rdiff backup, but it would make special directories that you had to know about. Just like the special but hidden directories in like a ZFS. The other thing I do is in /backup, /archive. I should draw this. This is like a little USB device that's connected to the server and mounted in. But then I have like yet another device over here. It's not a device. I'll put the big letter R on it. This is my rsync.net. And I like, so /archive and rsync.net are both backed by ZFS. So I'm shipping data over to rsync.net.
Yep.
I don't ship stuff over from my archive because my archive is itself and then a bunch of snapshots in ZFS. Well, those don't need to get up there. And in /backup, I'm not getting actually everything out of /backup and going into rsync.net. My rsync.net is definitely, I've got 4 terabytes of storage to use on this little drive right here. And I've got maybe a terabyte of storage available in rsync.net. And I can't remember if my archives count against that, like the ZFS snapshots count. They got to count. Against, my quota.
It's probably just whatever the actual on-disk usage is.
I mean,
which ZFS is slightly complicated for that.
Well, it's not my problem, and I just ship the stuff up there.
Right.
And then all of my stuff here, there's various ways to control stuff. If you're on the System D universe, what are you going to do? You're going to use one of the things, Timer D or whatever they've got now. That's the replacement for cron. But I'm not that fancy. I'm still just using regular old cron. And then I've got cron jobs on this green server, which is Carbon. And it's just cron job, which is pull stuff local, pull stuff local, pull stuff local, pull stuff local. And I don't really know how long those take to run because I'm not timing it. And my whole backup sequence doesn't run as like some sequential waterfall.
Right.
Right. I say, it's about midnight my local time. And then start pulling stuff off of all of the remote servers and pull it in here. And it's writing details to a log file that I never look at. And if there's a problem, my scripts all have like, set error fail and all this stuff. So they'll just like shit the bed if one part of them fails. And then I get a cron mail, from that. So I have this annoying other setup. I use cron in a lot of places, even like in my day job on lots of stuff. Like it's still incredibly useful. And even on these private machines and some back-end network, I still want cron to be able to like barf out and send me an email.
Right.
And anyways, I rigged a special mail setup so that I can always get the mail from cron, even if it's coming from like blocked IPs and spammy this and blah, blah, blah. Like kind of a pain in the neck, but, I want to receive emails from all this stuff, and I don't want to have to write my own special API to capture the outputs of this other thing that's already it already knows how to send mail when it doesn't do right. Like, let me just set mail2 in this cron file and put in the 6 cron jobs this thing should do, and I'll be a happy guy, and sometimes now that's a container that's already got a send mail or some mechanism for sending mail built into it. It just needs to know a host. And it's like, oh, but you get blocked on this or this or this. Anyways, that's me ranting about I love cron, but the modern internet is like really telling you you're doing it wrong that way. And I feel like, no, I'm not.
Right.
So those all just run, and they start running at like midnight. And I do have those guys running in a sequence, right? The script kicks off and it basically says clone argon, clone zinc, clone copper, clone magnesium, clone vanadium, clone selenium, clone scandium, nickel, manganese. Might have already said that one. I can't remember who's alive still anymore. Anyways, clone a bunch of servers. Now, I don't clone the whole box. I am relying on my cloud hosting environment for that. Every single one of these cloud hosting environments, Linode, Vultr, DigitalOcean, I'll pick on those 3. All of them are, run a server in our environment, right? A VM, long running, not like your Google Cloud and other stuff where you're expected to scale up and down. You back up that universe differently, right? We're still in the small business, hobby user, home lab.
These are pets and cattle.
Yeah. And those boxing, you can check the box.
Pets and children, sorry.
Yeah. These ones you can say, check this box, back up that machine.
Yeah.
So like for all the machines that are up there that actually make money, I've checked the box, back this machine up, and it does a snapshot. And it's doing some FS snapshot. So if you're using that as your database backup, and you're busy, there's like a not zero probability that it's going to snapshot the FS in the middle of something that the database is doing, and you would definitely not want to restore from that particular microsecond of the universe.
Postgres is worse about that than MySQL. For as far as how it syncs to disk and whether it's recoverable directly off of disk. That's been a long-standing challenge around backing up Postgres, whereas MySQL was pretty reliable. You might not get the exact consistency, and that's still always a problem, right? If you're not using transactions, but what the data you open will function if you copy it off of disk with MySQL.
You're saying that there's a case where PG is going to crash and be unrecoverable?
That's my recollection of it.
Man, I don't know.
But it really does. You need to understand the character of the workload that you're putting on the database to know if you are okay with that state of things being out of sync.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All the stuff that I'm backing up, all the servers I'm backing up are actual metal. So there's no cloud provider to say, "Hey, make a copy of this disk."
You're like, I feel like it's blasphemy. Make a claim that PG fails in some way, I mean, it hasn't let me down in 20 plus years, so it's just like,
you've never been blocked by a vacuum full.
I'm not saying that vacuum full is a thing that is not problematic. And I guess when I say it hasn't let me down is maybe the first time I ran a vacuum full ever in my whole life, I was like, oh, what the hell is this? My system is frozen. But it was in the documentation. So I feel like it was on me to say like, oh, vacuum full is going to do this thing. And I read the first sentence of the documentation and didn't read the next 4. And I was like, I'll run this command while I'm reading the next 4 lines of the instruction.
Oh wait, I just locked it for
like,
3 hours.
Oh, well, you're gonna freeze up everything. So fortunately, this is only like for a 20-person company who's busy enough, and the database was only, was measured in like tens of gigs. So not terrible. Not like a terrible scenario,
Yeah.
But
So have you figured out a solution for backing up email yet?
yes, I do. I have one. Oh, I'm so glad. You know what? I wasn't even thinking about this one. Look at this shit hack, dude. Let me see if I can find it. Edoshio IMAP move. I wrote this crappy PHP script ages ago. Oh, it's not rendering because of like I messed with my server, so it's giving me a problem. I'll fix that. But it says it's also available on GitHub. Maybe that's why my server is like acting stupid. Anyways, last commit 13 years ago. So do I have a solution for Mail's archive? Yes, and I've been using the same one for 13 years. You connect over IMAP and fetch everything.
Yeah, I use offline IMAP.
And that was it.
It's always had problems with large scale stuff in Google. I've got 20 gigs or something in one Google account and 15 in another. And Google's limitations in there, and the labeling structure and the duplication around labeling makes problems.
Yeah, I can't recall if this does it. Exactly. This is not the exact script that I use. But I'm doing the IMAP. I pull in the IMAP stuff, and all your messages have a message ID.
Yeah.
And so when a message is in your Google Mail and is labeled 2 or 3 things, right? Like, I don't know what the things are, right? It's for your company, and it has to do with a legal thing, and you're also talking to your accountant. So it's got a corp flag, it's got your accountant flag, it's got your attorney flag on that message. And you pull that down, it's still the same message ID. And so I guess this is my problem in that is I download it, and on my machine, I have an email file, and I just have the message. Because when I'm looking at it now, when I pull that down, I just go to all mail. So I'm pulling down everything.
You're just pulling down all mail.
No labels.
Yeah.
And I just connect on the IMAP, and I'm basically give me the mailbox stat and the list of all the UIDLs or whatever that thing is called in the IMAP world.
Yep.
And then fetch me all of those things, get a message hash, do the thing.
I probably should just sync all mail, but I used labels so heavily. I used folders so heavily.
Back in the day when folders were a thing. But
right.
in email,
I moved that in. I moved
one label to get
a large volume of that historical email into Google.
Right.
And so that folder structure still exists, and my head still follows it. So if I want to look for something, I still look for it in that way. And I still got more I need to move in that's still sitting around in old archives.
Listen, here's another big ass problem with all of this is I've got stuff on this server and that archive and on my rsync, and it's different kinds of crap, right? It's my Google Drive, it's my Google Photos. I put MMM here for machine. I probably should have just actually labeled those with like the letter A, right? These are really just like an app instance of something I want to run. Even maybe you have multiple app instances on a thing, but this is like an app server or some dedicated server. But then you're also right. We've got email that I want to back up. It would be cool to get, if we're going that way, it'd be cool to get my SMS off my phone. Now, I don't know how to do that, but Android has a thing that lets your phone do emails that connect to, or that lets your messaging connect to your desktop through some kind of Chrome related bridge. And I know that iOS has that too. You know, my wife's on iOS. She's been, she gets a text message on her desktop machine and on the iPad at the same time, and it works just great.
It's spotty if you have more than one phone and one computer.
You know, iPhone, iPad, and computer all to the same person.
Yeah. When you have like 3 different computers attached to it, it starts to get spotty. Plus, sometimes, but it's mostly Apple's authentication system that gets spotty, right?
Yeah, I mean,
multiple versions of OSs, you can't always authenticate properly or maintain an authenticated state. But yeah, it is backed up. Well, it is in a storage location that may or may not be backed up by your other backup tools on Mac OS.
Well, you can find those files and manually do something, presumably.
Yep. You can extract. There's a lot of stuff that you can extract from the backups. If you use an encrypted there's a lot of reasons to have an encrypted backup, but if you encrypt the backup, you can't unencrypt the backup very easily. Whereas if you store it with an unencrypted backup, you can just go in. It's a directory file system. You can just go in and get to the SQLite databases that contain your MMS or like your notes applications and all of that stuff, and you can extract data directly from there. I recently just recovered about a 10-year-old set of notes from an iPad.
Now we know how to back up mail, right? Just connect over a regular old IMAP and fetch all of it. SMS, you'd have to wiggle with your computer somehow. Drive, photos, and a whole bunch of that other stuff. rClone is the answer. Maybe your existing machines, check the box for whatever your service provider offers you, because it costs like $1. And then are syncing from those remote app locations, whether they're on a remote machine or whether that machine has multiple apps, those remote applications, all that comes into your management system, Carbon in my universe, the main server, into its backup and has it organized in some way. But yeah, and I forgot to finish talking about cron, blah, blah, blah. I cron all that stuff starting at midnight from my app locations into Carbon. And then at 6 a.m., I feel like all of that stuff should be done at 6 a.m. And in reality, if I ever looked at the logs, I start at midnight, it's probably done at 12:03. There's not a whole lot of delta that's going on any of this stuff. And these tools are smart and fast, and my disks are generally fast. And, again, this isn't mega terabytes and terabytes of data. The one thing that I do that is problematic, my PostgreSQL backups, I dump them out in the binary format because the text format would be very, very large. And if you have the binary format, you can sort of run it through PG Restore, and it'll recreate a bunch of the text-based format. And so that works swimmingly if I need the text base at some point in time. So I'm using these PG dump files. Now, those don't behave nice with rsync at all. That file is 100% different every single.
Oh yeah, right. Just like doing Java, like jar files are always 100% different.
100% different, you know. So those come in, and that becomes a problem. I guess it becomes a problem because I'm transferring that huge chunk over the network every single time. I don't do it because none of these databases are more than a terabyte in that archive file. So I don't really worry about it. But like places I know where the data is larger, their PG backup routine is more complicated. They're log shipping over to another box, running the backup off that secondary box because it's ever so much work. And they are backing up tables independently and shards and stuff like this, backing up sections of the database independently.
Yeah, and this is why I just always steer people toward managed database solutions, because backups are first-class citizens of RDS, and
get in there, check the box for multi-AZ, check the box for like super good redundancy and hot failover action, and you're ready to rock and roll. But it's now 3 times as much.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's only like really worth it if keeping your business around is important.
Yeah, that's the thing is like when we're talking, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is personal, hobbyist level, very small business, right? And
I don't even know if it's very small business. I know a place that is small-ish, right? They do a lot of dollars in revenue because they sell something expensive, but they have some requirements too, SOC 2 and blah blah blah, and they touch on some HIPAA related stuff, and so like fintech is kind of making sure they're doing stuff right, and healthcare people make sure they're doing stuff right. Really, all they're doing is helping people with paperwork, but the paperwork has sensitive data, so now they have sensitive data, right? They run, if they lose any of their data, they're like fucked, like super fucked. And they're not in the cloud, and they're not in RDS, and they're not on Google, and they're not doing this. And for whatever stupid reason, their database is still Microsoft SQL Server.
I talked to a team that didn't know where their SQL license was, much less when they bought it. And so trying to restore the machine that the database was on was impossible.
Oh, I haven't chatted with these folks about that, but every time I talk to them, I'm like, you got to move over to PG. You're not doing anything special with your database, right? Yeah. You're not using any of the special SQL features that MS has, right? You could still run your shit on SQL Server 2000 if you weren't being obligated to upgrade over and over. And so they're running all their stuff privately, and they're using this built-in SQL Server backup thing too that just like dumps it out, and they ship it off site, right. But SQL Server has a built-in differential backup, so you can snapshot daily and get something fresh every hour, and having a fresh delta every hour is good enough for loads and loads of people in the space. We're like, well, it's not perfect. Oh, of course not, it's not perfect, but we have a failover box, so we do have HA. And we are getting snapshots once an hour. So like if primary and secondary both shit the bed, I can go back to up to an hour ago and I'll be a happy person. I feel like that is pretty damn good for a team that's got 4 people on the technical team.
Right.
And who spend most of their time, tweaking systems integrations on their existing application.
Right.
My upstream provider.
The problem is, like, what's their risk, right? I mean, if that breaks, if they don't know it works, it's broken. And when they lose data, how much money does that company lose? Can recover from losing that?
Probably not. It would be like,
and they don't know it, they don't see it, and they won't have any plan for it until it happens.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that because I know the folks that operate it, and I know that their backups have been tested, right? The final nail in the coffin of backups is, well, now I've backed up all my stuff. Actually, I think there's 2 final nails here. I get all my stuff back up, and it all sits on my machine, Carbon. How do I find something in there? Searching in my backup for the crap I want to restore is part second nail in the coffin. And then the third nail is, well, now how do I actually affect my restore? Like if you don't have a run book for what your restore process looks like, you're in bad shape. My archive of my mailbox, like what does my restore look like? I know what the restore looks like on that one. I run the script that says take all the stuff local and shove it into a directory structure in an IMAP server. You can put and get messages from IMAP. So I know that works, and I don't necessarily need to like test that one once a week. But testing the integrity of my PG dumps, I do want to test those. Can I get my restore? I mean, I always feel dodgy because I like make an SSH connection over to this machine over there, and then I run a command on it, and the output is being like basically piped across the wire. And it's like, well, piping the output of something across the wire or dumping it onto a local file and then copying the file over, that's the same damn thing, right? But somehow I'm like, well, if it was a local file there and then I copied it here, I could like get a good checksum and I'd know that my local file was written okay. No. I don't know if my local file is written okay. I just know that I got a copy of what was written over there. So, the better policy is dump the file, SSH PG dump, output to standard out, which comes back over SSH to Carbon. Carbon writes the shit to disk, writes those bytes to disk. And then later on, I found this trick recently with PG. I was doing some stuff to try to get PG to recreate the stuff for the OpenTHC universe. What's our DR kind of plan? Well, OpenTHC is powered by, dozens of databases. Dozens of databases on a few machines. I need to back them up, and I need to be able to like restore them, make sure that they're going to restore okay. And I don't necessarily want to like restore them into a PG server that's always running. And so I'm not patting myself on the back like, oh, I'm a PostgreSQL super genius. But I did jump on to, I've got this little script here. I wonder if I can find it, how hard it will be to find it. So I got this whole test directory of, this is for OpenTHC. And so I got this whole test directory for SQL. And it does a bunch of stuff here, copying files in from all the other services in. And, we have this other little bit where it's like copy to a Docker entry point. Here, let's take the step back. So this is where you do the fun trick. Is you just run PG initdb with auth saying to trust it and making a data directory that's in some random fucking location. Make a random tempter. And then you run initdb in that directory in the way that you like it the most. Here's some other options you can see. And then you run basically PG start the server in that directory that you just initted with some options. And yeah, I'm assigning it to a random port. I wonder if I can find the port in here. Oh no, I'm using a fixed port, 42032. And so I put the stuff on that initdb in a random directory, start the PostgreSQL server in that random directory with its own special socket directory and stuff like that. And then I run all the stuff that copies the SQL files like my Docker. This replicates the same way that the Docker entry point does it. And then I just run each of those SQL scripts into the database that's the temp one that I've just started right there. Using, there's some environmental variables set at the top. So this PSQL connects to the same thing that these other guys are doing. And so now I've got my restore and it runs this and it runs this, and my little script that's right here makes that tempter, and look how clever I am. I got a little trap handler right here so that when it traps, it tries to stop the PG that's running in that directory, whether or not it's still there, and then it blasts my stuff. So like I run my backup script from that one, and then I'm running PG dump and I'm restoring that whole script, and PG dump makes it all the way through. Or I'm sorry, PG dump makes it all the way through. I get a file locally. I run a random throwaway instance of PostgreSQL, not even in a container or anything like that, just like right in my existing VM. PG, start a random one right over there. Run it for a half a second or however long it takes to like import the dump that I just got, which should restore totally perfectly. And I'm not looking at it afterwards for any, make sure that this specific record is in there or something like that. I mean, you could put a heartbeat record in your database somewhere that you could then look for on restore. I'm not doing that, but it was even easier than like fiddling with, well, let me make a Docker that can do the thing and test this and blah, 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 was to just say, oh, well, let me just run PG restore against I guess I would call it like a zombie PG instance. And then it's, oh, okay, cool. And it's done. And if it barfs, shoots me an email. through Cron, through my old Cron email. So, oh man, and then we didn't even get a chance to talk about this other one. Have you ever used SyncThing?
I haven't.
You're aware of SyncThing?
A little bit.
A little bit. That is.
It's in the category of things that I looked at once and moved on from because it didn't fit the thing I needed at the moment.
Yeah, so SyncThing was the thing that I was looking at, and I got two different ones on my Android. I have no idea why there's two different ones with like this identical icon. Oh, this one's called SyncThing Fork. All right. So I don't know what the deal was there, but like somehow I've got to get some box running on my local device, my local net, or through the VPN or whatever. Then I think you just say that you have a folder over here that you want to sync to somewhere else. Well, this thing's showing me a time that's like recent right now. I have a folder that has 4 gigs of stuff in it. It says unshared. I don't know what this. No, device is configured. Send and receive folder. Archiving old versions of a file versioning. So that's what this is for. I was looking at SyncThing just for the purpose of getting crap off of my Android device.
Right.
I wanted to get, like, it has a downloads folder, so occasionally I've downloaded something that I want here. I can't remember what else is on here. Oh yeah, I thought it was going to be my good way to back up photos. That was the other thing I wanted to do. I want to back up my photos, but my photos on, my Android device has Google account on it. So my photos just go through that thing. Same story with my drive. And I can't think of anything else that's on this machine now that needs that directory kind of like backup. Or I mean, there's a files directory on here. I wonder what, what's in my files app. Says I have a bunch of stuff in images, but is that like images, or is this, are these different than the stuff that's from my camera? It says all. If I say camera, that's the same set of pictures. Here's an old download. Oh, I see. This images has, here's pictures that have arrived in my SMS. Pictures that I've sent through SMS. Other pictures. Oh, and the various screenshots that I took. So that's the kind of stuff I'd be able to get off of my SyncThing. 21 gigs of app data. Fuck's sake. But I think the audio and all the videos. Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at these, they're looking like exactly the stuff that is being synced up to the Google Drive. So I don't need to catch any of that stuff because my Google Drive will handle it. I'm sorry, my Google Photos will handle that. Is that what it's called? Yeah, that's what it's called. So anyway, what else did we did our sync, we did our clone, we did SyncThing. We talked about a bunch of different stuff. How much do you have to pay for your, who did you say you use, Backblaze?
So I've got 6 machines under backup with Backblaze. And then, because that includes the laptops and stuff. And they still support my 10.11 machine, I think. Is it 10.11? And which is very nice because there's a lot of storage that I cannot, there's a lot of software on that runs that is not, cannot move forward. And I don't know how much I pay. Whatever the list price is. And then I'm probably at like $80 a month for B2 with, looks like about 14 gigs or 14 terabytes of storage in B2 from ARC. but that's all versioned, right? Because it's versioned history, things of that nature. So it's not like there's more than one copy of many things, so it could be more efficient. But I think my last Backblaze bill, I pay the yearly on the machine backups. Let's see, B2 was $80 last month. And I have been doing a little bit of work to clean it up, but not a ton.
I am in rsync.net, and I have like 650 gigabytes, roughly. I don't have it geo redundant with these guys. I just have it regular. And my 650 gigs costs me $9 a month. I have another this is for Itoshio. OpenTHC's got another profile that's the same thing. So I'm paying them $18 a month total. And those gives you the 7-day snap, the 5-week, the 3-month, the quarter, something like this. They give you hella snapshots, easy peasy. And it's like ridiculously cheap. And the backup is so easy. I just like run rsync command and ship it up to their boxes. You know,
right.
That's it. And I mean, I don't know. That's like brain dead easy. And I didn't have to figure out some crazy mount this or do.
I used to use a service like rsync.net that somebody at a small ISP had set up one, and they ran it for years, even after they closed the ISP. And I cannot remember their name. They shut it down. They shut it down probably 10 years ago. And I used to pay like $10, $20 a month, and I could access it via shell, so I could SSH into the machine. But behind the scenes, it was FreeBSD and ZFS snapshots and all the work, right?
That's
and so
what rsync.net is.
When I would SSH into it, it was just, like what machine I would get at the time. I had a special host name I would SSH to.
Yep.
And I could only see my stuff because it was all CH. My user was, the whole thing happened in a CH root too. So, and that, but it was like 200 gigs is what I had there. And that was where that was my secondary backup for all of the real physical machines that I was backing up, right? They would back up locally. Then I pull some other local stuff in and back all that back up to there. And when they shut down, I had to find a new solution. So that was, well, let me just rsync it over into one of my other machines that I'm already backing up at that point with CrashPlan, and let CrashPlan back that stuff up. And then I've replaced CrashPlan with Backblaze when CrashPlan fired all of us as customers. And
I just pulled up the Backblaze pricing.
It's like, I don't know, $100 a year or something. I don't remember.
Backblaze says $6 pay as you go is $6 per terabyte per month.
Oh yeah, and I see that I'm on the unlimited. Oh well, or unless you mean, is that for B2 or?
Yeah, Backblaze.
Let's see.
Well, it says B2 cloud storage pricing. Pay as you go is this. Reserve capacity starts at 1,500 per 20 terabytes per year. So you're like buying a bunch of reserve, but they've got a little pay as you go versus reserve. Reserve, you got to start buying in hella money. Backblaze to pay as you go per terabyte per month, $6 in Backblaze, 26 in S3, 20 in Azure, 23 in Google Cloud. Yeah. So like
R2, I think is cheaper, but R2 came out later. Cloudflare's R2 came out later. That was sort of a duplicate. They decided to take on Backblaze's implementation, and I think theirs might be cheaper. I don't know.
R2 puts their pricing. They have a free tier of something. No data retrieval, something. Let's just look at their storage. Their storage is 1.5 cents per gigabyte per month. So that's basically what? Oops. That's my per gigabyte price times 1024. So R2's price is $15.36 per month for a terabyte. And Backblaze is $6. So Backblaze is like Backblaze R2 is half the price of your S3 and things. It's like it's maybe 70% the price of your Azure or Google Cloud, but it's still 2x the price of your Backblaze. So when you use Backblaze, how do you get the stuff up to that thing? Do you have to use their stuff?
I'm using Arc. There's lots of tools that can do backups to S3 or an S3 compatible interface, right? There's lots of, but that's what I use Arc for.
Okay, but this tool, I'm sorry, this thing being Backblaze.
Backblaze is backup software.
S3 compatible.
So their backup software is different. But yeah, B2.
And they also have a backup software.
So they originally were a backup company, right? They offer backup software. Their spiel was 30 days of version history and unlimited storage. That's always been their core story, right? And it looks like $10 a month, $100 a year. The prices went up a couple of years ago for a machine. So if I've got 6 machines, I'm looking at $600 a year. And that is unlimited. That does mean that the machine that's got 30 terabytes of spinning disk to it, I back up 30 terabytes to that for $100 a year.
All right.
Now, restoring it is painful. It is probably the most painful version to restore from. But if I needed to do a full restore, it's still not going to be an image, not a bootable image. Mm-hmm. But I can pay them. They will stick it on a USB and send it to me. And then I send them the USB back. Or I buy it. I forget.
Or by mail. Order a USB drive.
And that's the fastest way. If you need to do a large restore, that is absolutely the best and fastest route. Now you have to enable it, but you can choose a 1-year version history for free at the same price. So I know why they didn't.
Okay, so but if I switch my archival solution into Backblaze, I don't know if R2 is giving me versioned shit like the ZFS would.
If you were to run on the machine where that archival is, if you were to run the Backblaze backup client at $100 a year, you could back up that whole tree to Backblaze within their standard backup ecosystem, right? And then you could still do something else like have another offsite. So the thing about it is that sometimes that tool breaks. Right. Software I had 2 resources where the client broke. It self-corrupted, and I had to just literally delete my backup and start my backup over again. It was 15 terabytes like that. Start being back, very frustrating. The other one that happened is that the client stopped working, and I think they pushed out an update on some of them that broke it, and you had to install the client over it. I didn't lose any data, but the other one I lost data. So it's only as good as software. So having multiple solutions means, right, I've got Time Machine doing local copies, local snapshots of things on some of the machines, on the desktops. I don't do it with the laptops. So all the laptops use Backblaze as their primary. But then Arc runs on everything that's important. And that's a varied definition. And that also gives me, that's what syncs to B2. So that cost me $80 a month for all the machines that are syncing there. And I'd say like about 14 terabytes of disk. And of usage right now, and then the $600 a month or $600 a year for the unlimited storage. So it's trade-offs, right? So I control what goes into Arc because it costs a lot more. Locally, I control what goes into Time Machine because I can't always have enough spinning disk to have 2 or 3 times the amount of disk that I'm running, right? And then Backblaze is kind of that large bulk. I've got everything here.
Got it. Your your audio got a little choppy there, sort of. But do you do your own offsite thing? Like
I don't anymore.
Disk?
Nope.
You're just pushing it onto your offsite is always now somebody else's cloud.
And right now it's all Backblaze's cloud. Admittedly, it's 2 services in Backblaze, but it's still all Backblaze. Yes.
Okay. Oh, because you're using R2 or B2.
B2.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was using S3.
And you're using their other service.
Yeah, I used their S3 originally, and well, you've seen the price differences.
Yeah, the price difference is like very significant, and if it's compatible, especially if all I have to do is like, I might just sign up for this one and then get my R clone connected to it, because like if I get into Carbon and I look at Carbon when all of that stuff is active, Carbon's got 6 or 7 mounts going. It's got a mount to this G drive and this G drive. Oh, David Busby at OpenTHC, David Busby at Adocio. So those 2 things are pulling stuff in. Didn't even get to talk about, well, how do I archive or make a backup of my YouTube? Don't have that yet. And that will take up loads of space. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then also, how do I search the whole thing? Weren't you saying you had chatted with somebody who was working on some kind of search project or something like that?
Yes. He is. I can't share much about it, but he might be able to if we get to talk to him.
Yeah,
he said he wanted to chat someday. So.
Yeah, cool. I'll tell you what I have been half working on. Just, when I have a couple of free minutes, which is not very often. But I want to be able to find. Do you remember when Google would sell you search in a box? They would sell you this appliance that could go.
Yeah, the Google search appliance.
Crawl your network, and you could tell it where to crawl, or you could push stuff into it, and you could API into it and say, hey, crawl this resource, crawl this resource, crawl this resource. How hard can that be? Grab some text out, shove it in a database. Well, I got a good database for full text search. SQLite's got a reasonably good FTS in it. So does PG. So now I would like to get to all of my email, all of my GitLab, all of my fucking code, all of my docs, all of my other docs, all the EXIF data in all of my images, and all the stuff in my drive, and the other drive, and the other drive, and the other drive, and then other stuff that I've backed up. And I would love to be able to type in a search in there that's just like something, something. And now I can search my whole whatever. In my own mind, security's out because I'm going to be connecting and searching to stuff, all of which I have read-only access to anyway. And so I should be able to at least read it and see where it is, right? I don't want to be able to edit anything in my archive, but I do want to be able to index all of my everything in everywhere. And in my mind, it feels like, well, the easier way is get all of the stuff local first, then index.
Right.
So I've been fiddling with Go to work on something that does that because, well, Go is pretty easy to do stuff like this, so I can index my own file system really quickly now, get the file name, and then for special files of special types, I can get the information out of them. Right now it's a limited set of files, but, I should be able to find and then get compiled right into my binary that runs the PDF parser and the ODS parser and the blah, 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 so that I can, get all of the interesting metadata and real data out of a huge number of file types. And then just extract all the text and shove it into SQLite and not worry about it. You remember we were doing the TK 9.0, make Golang, make an app, and you had it work.
Oh, yeah.
So I tried the same thing. Were you using Claude or were you using GPT? I was using just recently. I tried the same bloody thing with GPT.
I was using 4.0.
Yeah, I just was using 4.0, and it gave me all this stuff that was like TK. That was not that TK 9.0. It was nowhere close to what.
Well, I copied and pasted the document from their big README or whatever, their document.
Oh, you had copied the whole document?
I gave it that document. I copied and pasted it and dropped it right into the chat context, so it had current reference.
Okay, that's maybe where I went wrong. I was just like, "Hey, write me some crap," and I was like, "This does not look anything like what I saw the last time." Some bullshit.
Another option that you might consider for things like that is effectively vendoring the library into your tree.
Yep.
So that way it's available to your agent-based tooling right there locally. It can look at the implementations. It can look at all the things. You just tell it, hey, here's this library. Here's where it is. You can look at it. And it would have its documentation and everything available. So, pulling it down and vendoring it in would be another way when you're pulling in new stuff and stuff that the chat tools don't know about yet.
Right. That's a neat trick. I might have to try that one. Next time, I guess, is what I should.
I loved it when we were just as supporting all of this complex code, because I never had to worry about what library are we pulling in, because at EA we vendored everything. In our code base, I could expect all of my PHP libraries, all of my 98% of my C++ libraries, right? All of my Unity libraries, it's all sitting there. So I can just grep my tree and I can always find what I need.
We should take some time and I should tell you about this other project that I've been working on that is only moderately done, only works for some things, but it's all how to basically vendor all of the things. I want to be able to have, and these days all the things means, so I was saved from left pad issue. Do you remember left pad?
No. I missed this one.
We'll have to save it for another time. I got to go and do a thing, but I'm going to put it in our noise machine doc. We'll have to talk about this one, but vendor all the things, bro. I'm totally with you 100% on vendor all the things, actually. And we'll put that up. We'll put that one up for the next one. 04-21. When is the next one? Are we going Wednesday?
Wednesday, I think.
Yeah, 23. All right, I'll put it on the schedule.
Apparently, I can't find my calendar because Mac.
So Backblaze, huh? I don't have one, man, but they're gonna.
Yeah, and it looks like they don't do a Linux client, so your only option would be using B2. And they
so I use our clone. I don't care if they have a.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But you can't use the unlimited. You can't use the unlimited storage on Linux.
I'm gonna be paying $6 a terabyte, man. I am not sweating. Okay. I already thought that it was super cheap at rsync.net, and my command is basically just run rsync. So I feel like I would be using rsync.net for my long-term archival of important stuff,
right?
Because it has the ZFS snapshots,
and you can SSH into it.
You can SSH and run a command, but you can't leave an SSH session open.
Sure, but you can. It means you can SSH in. You can cat a file if you needed to. You can actually see your content from anywhere if you had to.
Yeah, I think it supports a couple dozen commands, right? You can run quota. You can run rsync, obviously. You can run CP. So if you had a file on that remote machine, you could CP a file all in that universe. It's pretty cool for that. And I'm using it for important stuff, family documentation, right? Finance docs, blah blah blah. You got to encrypt all of that stuff before you ship it up there. I bet you the R2 or B2 client probably does some encrypt it before it ships it up there kind of thing.
Check. I know Arc has its own encryption layer, so everything it's putting up there is within that encrypted, basically Git type database. But definitely double check to understand what your library or what your sync backup tool does when you start shipping your code off somewhere else.
Yeah. I'm not worried about the code, but there's
your data.
The finance documents.
Yeah.
You know, for personal stuff, you know, that's the kind of stuff I'd like. I don't want to lose it right now, but in 7 years, I don't care. Right. You know, and it's like, oh no, somebody's going to get my social. Probably can just type that into Google.
It was on my driver's license for years.
What?
Georgia used socials for driver's license.
That's so crazy.
They moved away. Everybody, as far as I know, everyone who used socials on driver's licenses moved away. But, you know, yeah.
That's just madness. All right. Okie doke. Anyway, yeah, that's it for this one. Back up all your stuff. Plenty of tools available. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I'll see you at the next thing.
Alrighty.
Cool. Out.